Hi, everyone. Hi, we're back. We're Mora Medical. My name is Dr. Rock, and I'm here today for our weekly live stream with two of my amazing colleagues. We have Dr. Jen and we have Christina. Christina, one of our amazing PAs. You guys want to introduce yourselves and say hi?
Sure. Really excited to be here today, Rock. As you said, I'm one of the physicians here, and it has been so much fun working with people, helping them to implement lifestyle changes and experience the power of lifestyle change and improving health. And um, it's it's just
Oh,
wonderful.
yes. We are Mora Medical. Mora, Christina, you want to welcome everyone as well and tell everyone a little bit about what we do?
Sure, yeah. I'm Christina. I'm one of our PAs here at Mora Medical, and just like Dr. Jen, I'm excited to be here for the live session today to answer some of your questions. But Mora Medical, we are a medical practice that specializes in helping our patients to reach their health goals, really. And we do that by helping people to lose weight, to improve their chronic conditions, reverse chronic disease in some cases. And the goal is to not only improve our health and your health, but also to improve your quality of life and get you back doing the things you love doing that maybe some of your health conditions kind of limit right now. So that's one of the main, that's just a very high level overview of what we do.
That's right. And you can find us at mora.com, Mora.com. We are currently live in a handful of states, notably Florida, Texas, California, and New York, and a couple others that we're still we're building up this infrastructure to eventually provide this care for everyone. This is something, lifestyle medicine is the therapeutic use of lifestyle changes to treat and prevent and powerfully, as my colleagues have mentioned, to reverse chronic disease, to help you lose weight in a sustainable way, and to help you, as Christina just said, live the life that you want to live, to fulfill those higher aspirations you have in life. So we're super excited to work with you. And the FaceTime you get with your care provider, with your clinician at Mora, is an hour a week. An hour a week. So that right there tells you we're centered around building strong relationships with our patients, because we know from research and we know from our experience that change happens. Change happens with strong relationships, conversations, and then building that trust. And so that's why we're there with you an hour a week. And these are group visits. So you're not just with us, you're with a group of other individuals who are also working to live their best life and optimize their health, and you're holding accountability and support and learning with each other. And so please find out more at Mora.com. All right, today we're going to talk about, and thank you all for joining us. If you're watching live, if you're watching this recording, please feel free to submit questions if you're watching live on the chat. We're all lifestyle medicine clinicians. Feel free to ask any questions you have. We were going to talk about whole food, plant-based desserts. And I sort of mentioned to the group this morning, oh, that's the topic. And Dr. Jen, you very quickly wrote to me. You said, I've never done one of these streams. What's the website? But I really have to come on to tell us about that. Where's this zeal and enthusiasm you have with desserts?
You know, this is one of my favorite topics. Not because I eat dessert all the time or, feel like I have to have dessert. It's it's a big topic in my household. Okay, so
Right.
I should probably let people know I'm a mom. I have 5 kiddos and a husband who likes his desserts too, and then we don't go overboard. And um, when we really started shifting the way we ate a few years ago and moved to a whole food plant-based lifestyle, um, it was interesting to listen to the questions. You're like, well, do we still get to eat cake? Do we, what are we having for dessert, Mom? And this is a common question in my house. Is there dessert tonight? Literally every night somebody asks, is there dessert? And there's not dessert every night, I will say that. But I find even talking to patients about changing eating habits, people are wanting to know how often they can splurge and have a little treat and so forth. So it has become a challenge to me to figure out ways to take recipes and not just provide a sweet treat, but to make them healthier. I get so much joy and satisfaction out of serving a dessert that tastes amazing and decadent, and then I tell people it's actually good for you. I mean, it's such a joy. So it's kind of a little hobby. So that's why I got excited about that.
I love this.
Yeah. So I borrow recipes from other people, and I've also taken recipes and, I don't know what the right term is. We sometimes use the term veganize or healthify or whatever, but really doing things like taking the oil out of recipes. If you've ever baked a cake, most cakes have tons of oil or butter or both. And the challenge of creating an amazingly delicious cake that's moist, that doesn't have any oil in it, it's pretty exciting when you get it right.
Right. That's right. And I also heard you say something, we don't have dessert every night. That's a really, I want to even like pull out and back up a little bit about like the concept of dessert. And when I was growing up, dessert was one of those things we had once in a while. It was like, certainly for like a birthday or some special occasion. Like it wasn't regular dessert. When I got to college and then I went in the dining hall and they had a table with different cakes and pies like every day, I was like, oh, why wouldn't I take this every day? So, but that was a foreign concept for me. I knew some people, for example, back then, they're like, oh yeah, I had dessert every day growing up. And I think it's interesting, if you have that kind of tradition in your background, in your growing up, our traditions with food, often this idea that you have to end the meal with something sweet. And even now, I don't think there has to be dessert because I didn't grow up that way, right? I went through this phase where I was addicted to the cake in the dining hall, but I don't know. Christina, is that something, when you were growing up, did you have dessert regularly, or how do you look at it now?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And growing up, we did not have dessert regularly. It was pretty uncommon for us to have desserts at home. My mom was fairly healthy cook, and so we would have them on occasion for birthdays and special occasions. And then once in a while, she would make like a tray of brownies or like Rice Krispie treats. Those were like the two things I can recall that she would make more often, just like something easy. And we would all get so excited that there was some dessert. I remember, for instance, on Halloween, we would go around, right, and get candy. And then she would have we'd be only able to eat one piece of candy on Halloween. And then we could eat one piece of candy every night until it was gone. And so that was like a big thing. Wow. Like for the month of like November, we had like one piece of candy a day. But other than that, we never really had like dessert after dinner. So that's the way I grew up. And now we don't eat dessert very often now, but sometimes like on the weekend or a special occasion, we might make one of these healthier dessert options. So that's kind of how it is in my house.
Right. Yeah. Jen, nowadays you just do something similar where dessert is once in a while. No, it sounds like there's a desire
honestly,
for it to be every night.
It's not every night. Absolutely not every night. But I would say probably once a week I make something. Other nights of the week, my kids will find something sweet, right? I do try to encourage, fruit as an alternative, or they will go and find that hidden away bucket of Halloween candy and just have a little piece of candy to satisfy their sweet tooth.
Yeah.
But I would say at least once a week I will make something for the family. Yeah.
So first of all, I hear, and that's a really great thing to talk about, is how desserts or something sweet, first of all, it doesn't have to be like something you make or even something packaged, right? It could be a piece of fruit. It could be fruit in different ways. Like I love frozen fruit. Right?
Yes.
It elevates the experience of certain
One of
fruits.
my favorites.
Of a lot of fruits. I found these little, the mandarin oranges, like those segments taste amazing frozen. They taste like little popsicles.
Grapes in the freezer. Yeah.
Alvaretta asked a question. Alvaretta on Facebook says, with this plan, can you still eat the food you eat? Alvaretta, that's a really interesting question. So one of the things, I think desserts are a great topic because, and maybe Dr. Jen, you can elaborate on this, like, you go from eating cookies that are made with butter and sugar and, or oil and refined flour to cookies. Now, what are you making your cookies with?
Oh, okay. So I don't use butter and oil and don't use eggs. We substitute flax eggs for chicken eggs. I actually, if I have a recipe that calls for flour, oftentimes I grind whole wheat flour. I actually have a wheat grinder or mill, so I get big buckets of wheat berries, and we'll grind up whole wheat flour. There's a pastry setting on the grinder, so
make a fine flour,
a finer flour. So I'll use the fresh ground flour and the flax eggs, and there's usually applesauce in there. Some kind of, occasionally I'll use regular brown sugar, but sometimes look for other types of sugars. Sometimes date syrup as a substitute, or chopped up dates, pureed dates. Dates are a fantastic sweetener for desserts. But those would be the some of the substitutions for the cookies.
That's right. I hear that. And Christina, what about you? Are you much of a baker?
Doesn't sound like as much as Dr. Jen here. I don't have a mill to make my own wheat flour, but I tend to buy wheat flour already made. So if anyone doesn't have the mill, you can purchase wheat flour. It's maybe not as good as yours, but one of my favorites is actually black bean brownies. You can make brownies that you use black beans in there, actually. So you get quite a bit of the protein and fiber. And so even though you're using date syrup in the recipe, your blood sugar won't go up as much because you've got all that fiber and the protein from the beans. And then usually I'll add some type of nut to it. And so that's one of my favorites, that whole food plant-based kind of dessert.
That's awesome. And I will say one of the things that comes with being a patient at Mora is beautiful recipes that we've put together and a cookbook. We now have a printed cookbook that you are going to receive. Actually, that's not quite off the presses yet, but soon, within the next few weeks, we'll be sending out cookbooks to our patients with full of recipes, including desserts, including whole food plant-based desserts. I want to echo that. I'm not much of a baker, and I'm very lucky that my partner, my wife, is into baking, and she used to bake with all the things, butter, eggs. And then once and then more so the family started eating this way, we've discovered this whole world. And so we often grind oats into flour. That's super easy. We have oats on hand all the time, and you can grind it in a blender or a food processor. And the nice thing is, it doesn't have to be that fine. Sometimes in some recipes, I kind of like it a little, like in cookies, it's kind of nice to, the other thing we keep on hand, which I want to point this out, is even whole food plant-based desserts, like sometimes they can be calorie dense if you're using nuts or nut butters. So I love my wife, and she makes these amazing cookies, but she puts almond butter and she uses almond flour as part of the flour. Not, so I always have to keep that in mind too. Like, they're good and they're healthy and they're they're higher in fat. So they're way better than like something that would be made with, in fact, because there's some fat from the nuts, like they like I'm eating them, I'm like, these taste like really good cookies. Like, I don't miss anything in those. Yeah. Okay. Susan says, you don't need dessert. If you eat healthy foods that keep you full, you don't want anything else. That's an interesting. Yeah. I often feel that way on a whole food plant-based diet. Like, I mean, I will have fruit just because it's good to have some fruit, but yeah, I don't often feel like I need dessert. I'm not like hankering for it. I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, as you go whole food plant-based, your taste buds do start to change. So at first, sometimes the sugar cravings can be increased when you first start to change your diet for the first couple weeks. But if you get past that period, your taste buds start to change. And exactly what she said, you kind of crave the sugary, sweet things less. And then like fruit, like you mentioned, actually tastes like a dessert to you. I mean, it tastes like that's one of my go-to desserts now. I mean, I almost don't even consider it a dessert because it's eating fruit, but I do sometimes have that as like a little snack, frozen fruit, but it tastes so sweet because your taste buds change. And so it'll taste like a sweet dessert, but it's fruit.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Alvaretta asks, what type of food can you eat with this plan? Like chicken, fish? Okay. Interesting question. Now I want to say, so Alvaretta, it sounds like you're wondering, when we were talking about a whole food plant-based diet, sort of what do we mean by that? And first thing I'll point out is that it's emphasizing the food that is healthiest for you, which is whole and processed plant-based food. And that is fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes like beans and chickpeas and lentils, and nuts and seeds. And those are all whole foods. Those are the foods that promote your best health. We know they help reverse chronic disease. They help you maintain a normal weight. And so what am I not saying there? Like, well, all the other stuff, processed food and animal products are the foods that we're suggesting you don't include in your diet, but it's not an all or nothing phenomenon. We have so many patients who are coming to us. I can tell you my own experience. I went from eating a, completely mixed omnivore diet, meat, dairy, eggs, everything, to, slowly transitioning, and for a year I was just trying out different recipes because I wasn't sure what I would eat. And that's one thing we help people do, is sort of we meet you where you're at. The expectation isn't you change overnight. It's that you learn how to incorporate the stuff that's really good for you, all the plant-based stuff. And if that can be the bulk of your meals, if that can encompass most of your meals, we help you do that in a way that you learn how to make it in a delicious way. You learn how to make desserts like we're talking about, then you're going to want to eat that way. And your health, the goals you have for the type of person you want to be, your weight, your whatever it might be, Alvaretta, that those things, those start to happen, that fuels this desire to change the way that you're eating now. And the things that you thought you liked, like the things that you're eating now that maybe you can't imagine not eating, you become disillusioned with those things. Those things don't have the same effect on you anymore because you realize that you get so much more out of eating whole and processed plants all the time. I don't know if that, hopefully that answered your question, Alvaretta. Okay. There's another question. What about, and I'm gonna have one of my colleagues answer this. What about healthy fats such as coconut, avocado, olive oil? Do you include those on a plant-based diet? And I would say, I'll pass to Dr. Jen. You want to
Sure.
take that?
Absolutely. This is a common question, and first of all of those that you mentioned, coconut, avocado, olive oil, are plant-based, and they are considered healthy fats. Okay, we need a certain amount of fat in our diet, but we don't need to add fat to our diet to get what our body requires. It's such a small amount that it's not something that you have to add to food to cook with. I'm sorry. When it comes to making a choice, though, for what to cook with, some of them are healthier than others. For example, coconut oil is pretty high in saturated fat. The so-called tropical oils, coconut and palm oil, are very high in saturated fat, where the others, like olive oil, are mostly polyunsaturated and are considered a much healthier choice than the saturated fats. Now remember, all fats in terms of calorie density are created equal. Okay, all fats are 9 calories per gram, but we do prefer to consume more of the unsaturated than the saturated fats. So of those you mentioned, I would lean more toward olive oil when necessary. Avocado is an interesting one. Avocado is technically a fruit, right? And it is definitely a food that we know has healthy qualities. It's got a ton of fiber, has phytonutrients and antioxidants, but it does have a fair amount of fat. So if we're in weight loss mode, we want to minimize things like avocado, but they do have a place in a plant-based diet.
For sure, yeah. And with oil, I always just make the same analogy is like, we know fruit juice isn't healthy. We know when you extract one part of the plant, there's just the sugar and juice, you lose all the fiber, all the nutrition. Olives are no different. First of all, olives aren't very high in antioxidants to begin with. Like if you look at plant foods, like olives aren't super high on the list. So I always think it's interesting when people say that olive oil is a really good source of antioxidants. It has polyphenols. And I looked this up myself, because you can look up the polyphenol and antioxidant quantity. And there's more antioxidants, polyphenols in a single blueberry than a tablespoon of olive oil. And the tablespoon of olive oil has 120 calories, and the single blueberry has less than 1 calorie. Which one am I going to get my antioxidants from? So anyway, that's the argument you'll hear sometimes. And so in Dr. Jen, you pointed out, it's like compared to what, right? So if you're switching from butter, certainly like switching to olive oil is a good idea. And if you're wanting to remove processed food from your diet, which is what we advocate for, oil is a processed food. It's just pure fat. That's right. Okay, so this looks like Marcia from one of my circles, actually. Hi, Dr. Rock. 3 weeks off sugar. I was raised on mom's home made desserts. Eat everything on your plate and you'll get a dessert. I'm a sugar addict. Treated myself for years with sweets. This discussion is very interesting to me. Dates are now taking care of my sweet tooth. Thank you for this. Oh, unfortunately, I won't be in the circle today. Okay, well, Marcia, thanks for letting me know in a public space that you won't be in the circle. And I hide that. And does anyone, Christina, do you have any thoughts about that? And thoughts for our other patients about maybe they have, so many people have this issue with sugar, right? Sugar is an addictive compound. So thinking about dessert and sugar and whole food plant-based desserts.
Yeah, no, and that's a fantastic question. And actually, I mentioned before that I didn't have dessert much growing up, but I can totally relate to the idea of, it wasn't around much. So then when it was around, it was hard. It was difficult, right, for me to just have one piece because I normally didn't have it. And so when you sometimes when you limit it too much, right, it can be hard too. And then when I went off to college, just like you, Dr. Rock, I had a hard time. There was like cookies, and there was a big thing at A&M. They had Sabisa cookies, and everyone wanted to get Sabisa cookies every day. So, and And yes, a lot of our patients and all of us, we're all humans, right? And we struggle too with different like sugar addictions and different things like that. I would just say as I kind of mentioned before, as you start to transition your diet, some of that taste buds will change. Not that and that can kind of help with the addiction too, because I've actually had a few patients who've told me they've had a lot of sugar addiction. They started going through the whole food plant-based journey with us. And one of my patients actually just last week said, oh, I had a dessert that I usually love that from a restaurant, and she got it and she said it really didn't even taste as good. Like there was things that I was making at home that I realized had a lot more flavors that I was enjoying even more. So just know that sometimes as you change, the things that you kind of dream about are like, oh, I can't have that cake that I love. Yeah. Even if sometimes we go back to it, and I've had that experience, I'll have something that like from my childhood, I'm just like, oh, like that tasted so good. Yeah. And you have it again, and it actually doesn't even taste the same. And then you'll have something like Dr. Jen's cookies probably, and the black bean brownies or the nice cream. Like I like to make nice cream, just basically bananas and fruit. And it tastes delicious, and you don't have to necessarily like avoid all sugar, right? Because there's simple carbs and complex carbs, those complex carbohydrates like in the fruit and stuff. And that can be really helpful when you're trying to like decrease your cravings too for sweets.
Yeah.
Hopefully that answered your
question. That's great advice. I hear the taste buds change. Absolutely. And then, where fruit, I mean, even Marcia said that. She said dates have become my new friend. And you see, dates are very sweet. They're very, very sweet. And there are research papers. There's one, in particular that looked at several varieties of dates from the Middle East and showed that they don't cause big spikes in the blood sugar when whole dates are eaten. It's fascinating. There's so much sugar. Why might that be? In plants, there's some exceptions, like grapes are an exception, for example. Sugar in grapes is very freely liberated. But in a lot of fruits, even like berries are a great example. Really, really sweet berries. We don't absorb a lot of that sugar. It's trapped in cell walls in plants that we don't do a very good job breaking down. So somebody here Alvarez asked, what about smoothies? And, the blender does a better job than our digestive tract does, breaking up those cell walls. So in smoothies, I know many people who have healthy smoothies every day. And those usually include a couple things beyond fruit. So some fruit, yes, you can include some apples, but try and include greens. Actually try to make greens over time the majority of the smoothie. Smoothie will then become like this really big beneficial thing you enjoy and have every day, because getting more greens in your diet is actually really, really healthy. And then another strategy in smoothies, because all that free sugar is liberated, is just making the greens add some fiber, but then adding some fiber to the smoothie, either adding like a fiber supplement, like psyllium husk, for example, is another strategy. Because what happens when you consume fruit or sugar with fiber, it forms this sort of gel-like matrix in the digestive tract, and that sugar absorption gets slowed down. And when you have fruit in its sort of normal food package, that's what happens. And then when you blend it, you sort of liberate. Juice is another sort of extreme of that, right? Because you've actually removed all the fiber. So the sugar is so smoothie is certainly better than juice. But in that way, if it's just a fruit smoothie, you're going to absorb a lot more sugar than if you ate the whole fruit. So including greens and some fiber strategies that you can use to make that smoothie even better for you, and you can enjoy it every day. Okay. We're getting up at the half hour. I just want to thank both of you for being here with everyone today. Thank you, Dr. Jen. Thank you, Christina. I thought this was a really fun conversation. Last thing I'll ask, what are your kind of go-to sources for whole food plant-based recipes? Or Dr. Jen, you may be writing your own based on what I'm hearing.
I do. I'm also gonna highlight one that's been a favorite recently, and I know some people in our community are familiar with Plant Pure Nation. and Kim Campbell's cookbooks and recipes. Two of her dessert recipes have become absolute favorites in our house, and I'll share one of them. Is the recipe is amazing. I believe it's called sweet potato chocolate pie, and the crust is a mixture of oats, a nut, either walnuts or pecans. I've even used almonds. There are dates in there, unsweetened coconut if you choose. You blend that all up in the food processor, and it's a no-bake crust.
Right.
And the filling is sweet potatoes, dates, cocoa powder, a little bit of vanilla, some little sprinkle of salt, and a little bit of melted dark chocolate, blended, poured into the, you do it in the blender, right?
Yeah.
Pour it into the shell and refrigerate it. It is amazing. It's so decadent, and it's sweet potatoes and dates predominantly. More sweet potato. I think there's 4 cups of sweet potatoes in the filling. And my kids said, "Mom, we could eat this for lunch, right?" But so yeah, definitely a shout out to Kim Campbell and Plant
That
Foundation.
sounds awesome. And I want to point out one thing that I'm glad you pointed this out. Even on like the most whole food plant-based websites, forks over knives, like the one ingredient that gets a pass is vegan chocolate chips. they end up somehow they've become a whole food plant-based ingredient. It's the one thing we sort of just allow in, and because if you look at the ingredients of vegan chocolate chips, it is sugar and cocoa butter and
actually there's not cocoa butter in it, but it's also such a small amount that
I hear you. I wanted to point that out because it is okay if then a recipe says put a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of vegan mini chocolate. You know what? You're eating such a fiberful, healthier version, like having that little bit of, and there are ways around that too. You can, actually, there's these new chocolate chips I've gotten recently that are sweetened with dates. From Who, you know, the company Who, HU. HU. Anyway, I think it's short for human. I don't know what it's short for, but HU, they make chocolate chips that are sweetened with dates. So they're a little bit more expensive, but we don't use that many of them. So, you know, and then anyway, okay. And Christina, any closing thoughts before we say goodbye to everyone?
I was just what I was about to say though was I use forks over knives. So I just wanted to mention that. I know probably most people are familiar with that. Yeah. That's where I find most of my recipes. They've got a great dessert section. And I just wanted to also mention there's one dessert that I have had requested the last 2 birthdays was my husband made it for me. It was a tofu chocolate peanut butter pie. So it's definitely higher in calorie, but it's amazing. If you like peanuts and you like chocolate, the tofu actually adds a lot of protein, and it's delicious. So you can look that up online. There's some good options there. And then final thoughts, I would just say, if you have further questions, we'd love to have you. And you can go to our website, mora.com, and you can just fill out the questionnaire there to set up an appointment with one of our wonderful intake team, and they can answer further questions and get you into one of our circles. You can get started pretty quickly. So if that's something you're interested in doing and have more questions, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to just really quickly answer Sparky. I had a question on YouTube, COPD question. I'm literally out of breath unless I'm sitting down. What would be beneficial to me? What exercises would be beneficial to me? Well, Sparky, I hope certainly you're working with your primary care doctor, and you potentially benefit from seeing like a specialist, like a pulmonologist. And some exercises that maybe you can ask about are just basically breathing exercises, and particular breathing exercises that strengthen the diaphragm. So when we breathe out against resistance, that can help strengthen the diaphragm. And also certain breathing exercises where you breathe in and you take breath holds. You want to do those without necessarily some direction from your medical team, but those are things you might consider. There's a fascinating book that I recommend to a lot of patients, actually, that I've read, that talks about breath work and sort of how it can be used therapeutically. It's called Breath by James Nestor. And so that may be something you want to check out too. And I want to say Carl said, I like sweet potato brownies with PB2 drizzle, keeps it low fat. And that is a good tip. Thank you, Carl, is that you can use peanut butter powder or peanut flour, which is defatted peanut butter, to add that flavor. I've even seen like peanut butter cookies that you can make with that. So, all right. Well, with that, please visit us at mora.com. And we're here to serve you and to help really anyone that we can who wants to make changes to their lifestyle and take control of their health. And we'll see you all back here next week. Thanks a lot.